sync up with ourselves. You are in the session of gamifying emotional intelligence for school and career success, especially in the age of AI. So we're going to do a little sync up using emotional intelligence. So I want you to just take a minute and just really think about emotions that you've experienced this week, maybe today, right now, and come up with an emotion that you'd like to improve. We'll just give it another like 10, 15 seconds and we'll get started. Okay, great. So I hope everybody is here and getting situated. And for those of you who just did this micro exercise of naming the emotions you've experienced and an emotion that you like to improve on, whether it's sort of an unpleasant emotion that you like to experience maybe less of, or a pleasant emotion that you hope to experience and savor and prolong more of. So that was really in itself a micro exercise of exercising the very foundational step of emotional intelligence. And that is our ability to recognize, understand, and label our emotions. And, being able to take this foundational step is really able to build our self-awareness and understanding how our thoughts, emotions influence our perceptions and our assumptions and behaviors. And then it informs us intelligently to know how to self-regulate and manage our emotions. And, I think all of us know the occasions where we've perhaps acted intelligently versus impulsively, right? Because of certain heightened emotions we were experiencing, and we were impulsively, irrationally have done something that perhaps we later regret. And so I've created a course, and it is being taught at the UC Irvine out of the graduate division. So it's for masters, PhD, postdocs, to help them understand what emotional intelligence means in the academic setting as well as in career development. And so the agenda today is really to help you understand, well, first, what is EQ, EI, and how do we actually teach that? And yet another hurdle, how can we teach this virtually, right? It seems counterintuitive. So how that's been done and some of the stuff that I've learned. And really the importance of emotional intelligence in the age of AI. We know that we need to upskill in many, many different ways, cognitively, but also social and emotionally, because in terms of influence, leadership, and communication, right? Those are the core human skills that really differentiate us from, the types of tasks and responsibilities that AI is able to shoulder and take over. And that in itself, this ability to build relationships, to communicate ourselves, to have that true, authentic human connections is what sets our own quality of life well-being apart, not, as well as our career success, our ability to connect with others. And some of you might think, well, I'm very empathetic, or I know my emotions, but, that kind of thing. And you probably do, but, we've actually found that only 36% of people are actually able to accurately identify their emotions as they happen, right? And retrospectively speaking, you might, reassess and understand what just happened, but in the moment as they happen. And on top of that, how do you manage your own emotional baggage, let alone being able to manage others, those around you, your patients, your loved ones, your coworkers, right? And how do you manage being that emotional dumpster at the same time and helping others, but also making sure to help yourself? So that is what we're going to talk about. And of course, it's not quite like a textbook where, you passed this exam, you got it, the concepts, the knowledge, but this is more focused around application, the transferability of skills. How do you actually practice, apply, and most importantly, transfer these skills and these practices into your own personal and social cultural context? So that's something I want to really press on. So since you did a little bit of an exercise, I wanted to share with you what some of my students have provided. So which is on that question, what emotions would you like to improve? So these are some of the emotions my grad students and my emotional intelligence class have shared. And, the only first step is just labeling precisely, granularly our emotions. But do we actually know the difference on here that you see, whether it's jealousy versus feeling envious, right? Feeling pressured versus feeling stressed, like burning out, feeling, the inadequacy versus unworthiness, feeling defeated versus demoralized, and, all that good stuff. So, and also knowing this, right? If someone were to tell you that they're feeling demoralized, what actions do you have to take, right? That's granular and capturing the nuance of what this emotion is telling you. Because I tell people emotions are data, and to be able to synthesize that data, right, intelligently is emotional intelligence. And it's really about how to make this data, how to make emotions work for you and not against you. Right? So how do we support those with these clusters of emotions around ourselves? And, we see grief on here, how do you support others dealing with grief? Whether it's grief of their lost abilities versus grief of their loved ones. And how do I support that anxiety and the loneliness of people's medical journey, and yet at the same time you are juggling the sense of overwhelm and imposter syndrome that we experience day to day. So bottom line, these emotions aren't going away. Our goal is not to completely suppress and write off these emotions, right? Because as Dr. Susan David said, that is dead people's goals, to be honest, right? Emotions are what makes us human, and it's important to build emotional intelligence and emotional agility. So really quickly about me, my own emotional intelligence journey. I started in human capital consulting at Deloitte, did a ton of learning and development, leadership development, creating teams, culture, and really tons of adult based training, and whether it's consultative selling, communications, negotiation, professionalism, all that good stuff. Then went and stayed in Silicon Valley, did talent strategy and succession planning, tons of qualitative 360 assessments, executive coaching, and then shifted my focus from developing adults to developing little people as a Montessori school director. And so I would say I've probably worked with from toddlers all the way to age 70 plus as a cognitive science researcher and working memory interventions. And so I can tell you that, I really see this common thread with emotional intelligence being needed really across all age groups, professions, industries, roles, and context. So this was just before the pandemic. I started teaching emotional intelligence at UC Irvine, and it started with undergrads actually, and now it's sort of offered really for working professionals, grad students. And this program, it's a 6-week certification program, is offered to all majors and schools. It's actually a really fun privilege to be able to teach interdisciplinarily, and having people from different schools, whether it's the medical field, the MBA, business field, engineering, social sciences, to really come together as a cohort and share your perspectives, knowledge, and experiences. And the sort of the application of this is just incredible, that although people come from different walks of life with different goals, but the usage is just so versatile and important. And so emotional intelligence, for those of you who want sort of like a brief overview, is really fundamentally consists of intrapersonal skills, which having to do with the self, and interpersonal skills, and that's more of the social based. So intrapersonal is self-awareness, the little exercise we've just done, as well as self-management. What do you actually do with emotions you've identified? So what I see, what I do. And interpersonal is more, reading the room, being able to read social cues, right? Not being socially awkward, knowing what to say at the right moment, and being able to have that influence, right? Is really around social awareness and relationship management. And ultimately, what I try to say is, it's really learned skills. Many people think that, charisma is something that people have, but it takes just so much practice and learning, and emotional intelligence works hand in hand with your personality, whether you're an introvert, extrovert, neurotic, all that good stuff. It amplifies who you are, but in a way that is aligned with your context to bring out the best in yourself. But at the same time, it also helps you build awareness and understanding that, what types of environments would you thrive the most? So one of the biggest barrier that really enable me or compel me to make it more gamified is sort of this need to not just learn in this case, but very much on learning at the same time. Because, much of our upbringing, the messages we hear about ourselves, and that translates into the things we say to ourselves, shapes the colors and the shapes of the lens in which we see and perceive the world, and the assumptions we make about the world as well as who we are. And, cognitively, one of the biggest barrier is our beliefs towards what are negative emotions, and what do we actually have to do about it, right? Do we suppress it, or do we ruminate on that until it, we make us like sort of stronger in that sense, right? And so many of us also, we just don't even perceive a need when we are experiencing burnout or certain emotions, because we were taught that, there's no symptoms like somatically, and what we're experiencing is not severe enough, and that we're supposed to be the stronger expert, right? The stronger ones. So that's also really important to unlearn and reset. Affectively, honestly, there's just set of like readiness skills that enable us to be more emotionally in tuned with other people, with ourselves. And, our inability to have good social skills, right, and our personal skills can really limit the amount of support we get, whether it's at work, right, or at home. And we know the emotions we have in both contexts really kind of, they cross germinate and all that stuff. And behavior-wise, help-seeking behavior is one of the biggest barrier that I see a lot in students, whether it's undergrad, grads, as well as adaptive coping strategies. So those are the things I cover, and we do so in 6-week chunks, with each week focusing on a specific competency of emotional intelligence. And sort of the premise of this is that it's experiential. So every week, students are accessing all the core content online, but we also have live Zoom session. And that Zoom session is interactive. It's all gamified. We play games. And each of the game each week will focus on particular skill sets learned, in that module for the week. So I'll share with you some examples. But we, this used to be in person, now it's online. And we utilize a whole lot heavily on breakout groups. And that actually has worked out really well, that some of the bigger, larger conversations that you really wanted to be more intimate, we can use the breakout room where students are grouped into groups of 5 or 6, and they would stay in that group for a few weeks to really bond and get to know each other and make mistakes and try new things, and in a very safe and brave space. And we pair up these groups by career interest. So if it's healthcare, it's not just everybody's a doctor or everybody's a researcher, but you may have a researcher, a nurse, a public health and policy person, practitioner. So it really enriches the perspective and the conversation when you're talking about context of when and how you exercise emotional intelligence and sort of the situations and dilemmas that you're experiencing, whether it's personally making a decision in career trajectory or what to do, not to do, versus cases you're experiencing. So let's see. And I tell the students they're really writing the syllabus of their life, because every single weekly assignment is not really textbook oriented, but rather you have to apply these skills in your own context with the people that are meaningful to you, and sort of also pondering over reflecting over a problem or a current situation that you have. So one example for self-awareness week is that this used to be in person. I just wanted to share with you how it might look like. So some of you might know the headbands game, right? Where you wear a mystery word and everybody tries to help you guess what that word is by giving you the clue. And so in this case, I remixed it to be online, and that each person in a group of 5 have their own unique set of, say, 5 nuanced emotional words. And in this battle of the emotions game, you need to give your teammates the clue of what this specific word is by saying, I feel this way when, or when you experience this emotion, you think, you feel, you do. And so it sounds quite simplified, but some of the words are, very nuanced and specific, so that it really invites the students to first think of very specific examples and examples that's happened to some of the experiences they may have. And their teammates would in turn need to decode that experience to really tease out what they might be feeling in those situations. And this is not just limited to the academic institutional setting, where I also speak with Fortune 500 companies. So this is an exercise online that I've done with Google, the leadership team, around, inviting people to name the elephant in the room. So a lot of the times, you may have people who participate less. So how do you create an inclusive environment where everybody can vocalize their needs or their observations of what might be happening dynamically or cohesively, in a team? And so we would come up with specific emotions that really tap into some of the common scenarios or sort of the difficult conversations that needs to be had, but maybe people don't know how to start. And so it also helps you to do cross-generational, cross-cultural communication, where it helps everybody to perspective take of how the interpretation might be through the lens of other people. And so, for an emotion, they may be talking about, I feel this way when. That's very relevant to the work setting. And in saying the I feel, it's also a way of practicing the I messaging, which is one of the first steps to giving healthy, productive feedback. And it also allows people to self-advocate. So these are some of the ways of, integrating just really harmless um, exercises and games to enable people to have the space to vocalize what they need, but at the same time practicing, right? Not just now, it's not just labeling emotions, but being able to express that, right? So that's just self-awareness. And then from there, we move on to, well, what do you actually do about it, right? How do you set your boundaries, with patients, at work, with your loved ones? So it's then expanding it more and more. Um, Now we have 5 minutes left, and so I wanted to share with you some of the tools I've also developed out of this exercise. So over the pandemic, it uh, the course is pretty popular, so it's always, tons of wait list. And so I was trying to figure out a way to codify some of these fun gaming exercises in a way that everyone will be able to use it on their own anytime, anywhere. And so I launched some of these card decks, originally launched out of the Harvard Innovation Labs, and really creating card games that can be played virtually, but also in person, face to face, to really enable people to not just learn knowledge and skills, but being able to apply them at real time in their own personal context. So one of the coping skills, I embedded 14 coping styles and 52 adaptive coping strategies that are emotion focused, appraisal focused, problem focused strategies to really enable anyone to be able to work on these skills. So the way the cards are coded, they're just poker cards, but the suits are reimagined as little characters that stand for the competencies of emotional intelligence. So you just saw self-awareness. So the heart stands for self-awareness, where the yoga posed diamond stands for self-management. How do you regulate your emotions? And so forth. And the number on the card has to do with the level of difficulty, so that you can literally pick up any card by the suit and the number, the difficulty level, the focus area, and of course the topic in terms of what you need to do. So this is one example of it. So it's self-awareness, right? Jack. So it's on the brand of #me. So it's really in a way to, almost like therapeutically integrate different sensorial and almost play-like spirit into understanding how can I build awareness of my strength and development need, and what do I know about myself, and what do I then translate? What do I want other people to be aware of who I am? So advertising slogans you can make for yourself, your theme song, especially when you're feeling down, right? The types of images and behavior that align with you. And I've done this through K-12 as well as with staff development, organizational development, team development, and building your own sort of team slogan. Couple of minutes left, so I just want to breeze through. This was sort of pre-post assessment of controlled treatment group of this certificate program, and sort of looking at, well, what's working and, all that good stuff. But I really want to save time for question, which I do see one coming in. So if anybody has other questions, feel free to put it in. And this is how you can get a hold of me. And if you want the full curriculum of the course, you can scan the center, which gives you like the whole outline of just everything what's being taught. Now, the question for the audience member is that, given the opportunity, what updates would you make to the course? That's such a good question. I feel like these days, especially with the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, I really will love to, and in fact, I'm actually now planning in the process of updating, providing more, even more bite-sized, concrete strategies into helping people to really manage loneliness and isolation. And as well as, I've done I was interviewed for this one of the emerging research around the impact of AI on our mental health. So I will also love to integrate more of that into the course as well, which I think is going to happen. So now it's 12:25. I definitely don't want to hold you up. Feel free to type in more questions, but you can get a hold of me. Love to hear from you. LinkedIn is probably the best. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Don't be a stranger, reach out.